meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Hello, Bethany. I am so happy to have you on the podcast today. You are actually one of our TFI Advocates. You're part of our Winter 2022 cohort and live in Nebraska. I want to give our listeners a little bit of context before we begin, but you and your husband, Benji, have been foster parents for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And you have had over 15 kids in your home, some through short-term and some through long-term placement. Did I get that all right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's been a lot.
It's a lot. Yes. You also were able to adopt your daughter, Journey, through foster care in 2021. And in 2021, Journey passed away from brain cancer. And we're going to dive into her story a little bit. And I know that that is a tender place in your heart. And I appreciate you being willing to share.
Yeah, thank you.
For our listeners as well to know, you have a biological son now. You also have a daughter in heaven, Journey, and you have 2 kids that are placed with you right now through foster care. So hopefully that gives our listeners just a bit of a context of a piece of who you are. Mm-hmm. And I just am excited to have the opportunity to hear your story, but also to be able to point back to God and know that even in heartbreak, especially maybe we could even say in heartbreak and grief and pain, He is present. And He's the provider. And your testimony is that, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't we just get started, Bethany? I would love to hear why you and Benji even decided to become foster parents. What was your journey into that?
Yeah, so it starts kind of a long time ago, actually. When I was in college, I did some study abroad trips to Guatemala and Mexico. And when I was there, I just really fell in love with the people and the culture. And I was like, man, I want to work with these people someday. And while we were on one of those trips, we had an opportunity to visit a children's home. And so I was like, oh, I think I want to adopt someday, from Guatemala specifically. And so as I got a little older, met Benji, I kind of, developed that heart for adoption, more so international. I was pretty naive about it though. I just thought, oh, we'll bring a child home from another country and it'll be great. But as you know, that's a very lengthy process, and we've learned a lot since then. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, as right. It seems to be when you're that age. So when I met Benji, he had never been out of the country, never really considered adoption at all. And I told him, if you marry me, you have to agree to adopt or move to another country to start an orphanage or a children's home of some kind.
Wow. How did he respond to that?
Oh, he had stars in his eyes. So
yes, he was head over heels.
He was like, sure, whatever. That sounds great. Yeah. So by the time we got married at 24 years old, we did start looking into international adoption and went on a couple missions trips together. And we just realized how expensive international adoption was. And at that time, too, Guatemala had closed its international adoptions because of the Hague Treaty. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't really an option anymore. But, as 2 newlyweds, we were like, man, this is so expensive. We can't afford it. And somebody, I don't even remember who, just mentioned, well, what if you just adopted from foster care? And I was like, oh, okay. Still, once again, super naive, had no idea what it meant. I didn't know a ton of kids who were in care growing up. And I think I knew maybe one foster parent growing up. So I really had no clue what foster care was about. But we contacted a local agency to get more information. And I thought, at the time I was a teacher, so I was like, oh, I have a degree in education. I'm around kids all day. This will be easy. And yeah, we took those classes, learned a lot more, became a lot more educated, but we were still like, oh, this is something we're interested in. So it was just kind of random events that led to it. And once we were taking the classes, we did feel led and called to foster. So we were able to welcome our first child. I think we were 2 years into our marriage by then. And so we started fostering then.
Wow. Yeah. I love just your honesty about how, I think we all go into it like that, or most of us, because you don't know what you don't know. And you do have an excitement. Like when God calls you to something, I feel like a lot of times there's fear. And yet I feel like when you get to that point of like surrender, at least in my life, there's become like a sense of excitement, anticipation there too. And so, I think that's just very real. And maybe that's helpful. We maybe need that to step forward. It's good to be informed, obviously, about realities as well. But you guys started fostering. I know that you have fostered teenagers. Now, who were they? Was a teenager a first one who came in, or kind of when you got started? What did that look like?
So even before we had finished the classes, we had told, you go through all the lists and the, you can mark down things that you would accept in your home, things that you wouldn't, everything from mental health things to medical, to gender, to race, everything. And we were pretty open. We just said we did not want babies. We wanted kids who were school age or above because we both worked. I was a teacher. I didn't want to stay home. So they were like, oh, well, if you want older children, you're going to have no problem getting a call. And so that was exactly what happened before we even were certified foster parents. They said, we think we have a placement for you. And so we took a 12-year-old girl as our first placement, even before we were fully licensed. Somehow they, were able to work around that. First placement, 12-year-old girl. And we learned pretty quickly it was not going to be as easy as we thought it was going to be.
Talk about an age that is hard for everybody. It's hard being 12. Yes. And then to navigate a stranger in your home as foster parents and a stranger as parents to a child. That's a big deal. So throughout kind of the path of having having children in your home, were most of them teenagers?
I would say they were mostly older. So our first placement was 12. We actually took in her sibling as well a couple months after she was placed with us, who was 10. Okay. And after they left, we did emergency placements for a while. And those were all teenagers. Those would be you get a call at midnight. A child has been removed. They come to your home for just a day or two until they find a permanent placement. So those were all teenagers, which I was really surprised about, because at that point, while we were doing emergency placements, like I said, we were open to just about any age, any school age, but it was all teens at that point. So our second official long-term placement came out of an emergency placement, and she was 17 when she was placed with us. So we had her until she aged out and transitioned into an independent living program at 19. in the state of Nebraska, kids are in care until they're 19. So, it's really interesting living with an 18-year-old when you're, 29, 28, 29. People would see us in the store and, oh, you have your friends, or,
Sure.
So it was really interesting, but it was such a good experience with her, and we keep in contact with her today. She's always texting me and hangs out with us on holidays. So it was a really good experience.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, I would love to hear about Journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I said, we were closed to babies and infants because I was a teacher. And so one day on my lunch break, actually, I got a call from our agency. This was while we had our 17-year-old teenager. And they said, hey, we're looking for a placement of a newborn. Would you be interested? And I said, why are you calling me of all people? Like, there's so many people. Our whole class almost was only wanted children, usually under like 2. And so I said, most people want babies. I'm the one person that said, I'll take the teenagers. Why are you calling me? And they just said, we don't have anybody right now that has the capability to take a baby. And we know you have good family support. So we thought we'd reach out and just give it a try. And so I called my husband and I told him at the same time, if we say yes to this, you're going to have to hold a baby, because he had never held a baby younger than 3 months. Wow. He thought, they're so fragile. Yeah. And just as a man, I think he had never necessarily wanted to hold infants, like women, sure, give me your baby, we'll hold them. But that just wasn't something he had done before. So he agreed to help, and he was like, well, if they're calling us, we might as well say yes. It's kind of strange, but I think we could handle it. So we said yes, and I got home from work that day, and Journey arrived about an hour later. We had no baby stuff at all. Our rooms were prepared for older kids.
Sure.
So we kind of thought, since it was a baby, that maybe she would be reunified faster. We didn't know her full situation. We weren't sure if we expected family members to maybe step in because it was a newborn. So we were kind of like, do we buy a bunch of stuff, or what do we do? So we ended up, of course, that night going out to Walmart at like 10 p.m., just getting the basic baby stuff. And I think somebody lent us a pack and play. So we were set for a little bit, and we were like, well, let's just ride this out for a little bit, see how it goes. And then we'll buy nursery stuff if it looks like it's going to be long term. So about a month or 2 into it, we knew it was going to be long term. Luckily, my sister-in-law had agreed to watch her during the day while I was working. So that was working out really well. We got all the stuff for the baby, and she was a happy newborn. Of course, slept a lot because she was a newborn. But also, which we didn't know at the time, she had a brain tumor that she was eventually diagnosed with at 3 months old. And so that was causing her to sleep a lot as well. But she probably around the 3-month mark wasn't keeping any food down, was very lethargic. There was a night we just couldn't wake her up, which was really scary. So we ended up in the ER. She was deemed as failure to thrive in the beginning. And then eventually, after some scans, they found out she had a brain tumor. So, it was right when COVID hit that she was diagnosed. Wow. Which turned out to be the biggest blessing, because everything shut down. My job as a teacher went remote. Oh, wow. So I was able to work from home while caring for her and staying home with her. And, eventually she was put on chemo, and we were going through all of that. So we couldn't go anywhere, but neither could anybody else. So, grocery delivery started, and all these delivery services which weren't in place before COVID happened. And that was such a blessing for us because we didn't have to take her out while she was going through chemo.
Right.
So yeah, she still seemed her spunky self after we kind of found out what was going on. They were able to place a feeding tube so she could get her nutrition through like a port. And the chemo port was placed as well. We started treatment on that. She was the youngest patient of the doctor at our children's hospital that they were trying different chemos on. She said she had never seen a patient that young be diagnosed with this brain tumor. So we were trying everything we could. The prognosis in the beginning seemed a little hopeful. I remember when she was first diagnosed, you immediately think, oh, this is super bad. It's, the outcome is going to be terrible. But the doctor said, people live with brain tumors their whole life. If we can just get it stable, she might be able to grow up and, be a typical kid. So we had a lot of hope in the beginning that through chemo and through treatment, she was going to grow up and live a long life. And you just hold on to that hope as you continue on through that journey and through that walk. So, after a few months of chemo and treatment, her biological mom, I believe, ended up giving up rights. I think it was sort of due to her having to need so much care. And so we knew at about 6 to 9 months old that Journey was going to be adoptable. And so it wasn't a question in our hearts if we wanted to adopt her or not, whether she was on treatment for the rest of her life. We were willing to go through that with her, or the other outcome, which we didn't think about much. So we just kept on with treatments, and some treatments worked. The tumor was shrinking at some points, and we were ecstatic, super excited, and just kept plugging away for a total of about 18 months. We were doing treatments. There was a period where I keep track of all our appointments and stuff like that on a calendar, and I counted all the appointments that we had been to in 6 months, and it totaled 86 appointments with her. But once again, it was a blessing that COVID hit, because I was able to step back from teaching and get a leave of absence by that point. So I was able to take her to all these appointments and things like that. And she didn't have any biological family members to support her through that or anything. So it was just us and our family trying to do the best we could with her. So, yeah.
Wow. I also just think about the unique reality of her being in foster care while you're walking through this, because for those who maybe aren't as familiar yet with it, that means she's a guardian of the state. And so how did that work? How did that work with additional paperwork or additional phone calls? Talk kind of through that unique dynamic.
Yeah, that was really interesting, just because most of the guardian ad litems and the caseworkers, they were like, we've never had this happen before. So they were like, we're learning with you. We don't really know what to do. So a lot of it, because we were their main caregiver, they pretty much left the decisions to us. We had to run the medical decisions by them. But because there was no family involved and we were pursuing adoption at this point, they were letting us make most of the decisions, and the doctors, would vouch for us with whatever we wanted to do. And as long as it made sense to them and to everyone, pretty much they would just sign off for us in that aspect. So it wasn't quite, I think it actually might have been a little easier than if I had been a biological parent, because I didn't have to sign any of the paperwork. I just gave the verbal, and then it was sent to the case manager team, and they would do all the paperwork. So.
Cool. I'm thankful that there was that level of trust and partnership between you all. Was she having any sort of contact with her biological family?
No, not at this point. And really, we only knew of biological mom.
Okay.
There was no other family involved. So once mom pretty much signed over rights and was out of the picture, she did not want to be contacted anymore.
Okay.
So that wasn't even really an option for us.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you're walking through this for months and months and months and months. I'm sure it had to be so tiring, exhausting, wearying. What does that feel like? What does that help us to kind of get inside of your head in those months with so much unknown, with some hope, with things not working right? I mean, just.
Yeah, I mean, it was a constant up and down for sure. Every day, every moment, you just had to live it day by day, sometimes hour by hour. You know, we'd be at appointments for up to 12 hours in a day. Then we'd get home at night, and because some of her medications required you to give them every few hours, I think my husband and I, at one point, we were only getting about 4 hours of sleep each every night, and just administering meds, even up with her, because of some of her meds, she wasn't sleeping very well. She would be the happiest camper at 3 a.m., just rolling on the floor, talking and playing. She was very mobile. If you didn't know that she had cancer, then you probably wouldn't notice. She was also blind. She went blind because of her brain tumor at about 6 months old. But like I said, you wouldn't know it looking at her rolling on the floor. She was very smart, would feel where she was going to go. And would use her feet a lot to help her navigate. So, yeah, we were exhausted, but we just enjoyed her so much, and we loved her so much. We just would push through those really hard times, and God gave us supernatural strength, because now, you know, I have 3 kids in the home, and if I don't get 8 hours of sleep at night, I am not the happiest camper. So I look back on those times, and I can't believe we went through that, because we just did it, and God gave us the supernatural rest and strength. That's all I can attribute it to, because we were emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted, but we kept going, and we got through it, and we just did.
Wow. When did it get to the point where it was like you started to realize that things are not looking good?
So she was about 18 months old when they decided she needed a surgery to place a shunt, which helps kind of drain some of the fluid that would build up in her head and in her brain. So she had a few surgeries, and it was kind of during all those surgeries and those treatments that they realized the tumor was continuing to grow, and the fluids were just getting to be a lot. So probably around 18 to 19 months, they had said, okay, you know, this is what we're seeing. It's not looking the best, but you can continue with treatment. And at that point, she had started to have some seizures, and her quality of life was really, really going downhill. And they said, you know, if by some miracle these treatments worked, she would never go back to baseline. She would always be in this state that she was in, which, like I said, by that point, she had declined rapidly. So her quality of life at that point would not be good. And so about 2 or 3 months before she actually passed, we had decided to just give her the best quality of life at that point, as it wasn't looking the best. So
I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what do you do in those moments? What goes through your head? How do you find hope?
Yeah. There were plenty of times I was, crying out to God on the floor and just praying, but also knowing what the doctors had said was running through the back of my mind. It's that hard balance between reality and hope and wanting a miracle, but also knowing that that might not be God's plan. And ultimately we wanted what God had for us and what God had for her and what was in his plan, no matter what that meant. Of course, selfishly, I want her to be here on earth. So I was praying for that miracle, but I was also praying that when the time came, if that time did come, that it was just smooth and easy and not painful, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, like I said, it was an everyday battle, ups and downs, and I look back on it now and it's just a blur how we got through it. But we had, a lot of family support, and the support from the hospital was amazing. And yeah, we just tried to keep our heads up and support her as best we could, because although we were going through it emotionally, she was going through it physically. And, her whole life since 3 months old had been pokes and prods and appointments and, losing her biological connection. And so we just tried to be there for her the best we could.
Yeah. When you knew, obviously in this time, as you were praying for a miracle, but also looking at what seemed to be a reality, you made a decision to pursue adoption. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we had been pursuing adoption ever since rights were signed over, but that's such a lengthy process. So, we knew it could take a really long time to get through that process, but we were hoping that we'd be able to just, have that moment. And so, at one point when the doctors gave us a prognosis that she had about a month or two left, they stood up and fought for us and, told I don't even know who it was, the case managers or the guardian ad litem, the judge, they basically said, hey, can we expedite this adoption? This is the prognosis from our professional medical stance. And so we would love for them to have that moment as a family. The journey's been with them since she had come out of the hospital. We want them to have that moment. So we ended up being able to adopt her 8 days before she passed. And it was on Zoom, and which worked out great for us because we didn't have to go anywhere. But it was a beautiful moment. And because I had always wanted to adopt, it filled my heart so much, even knowing that she probably wouldn't make it even a month. But just to be able to call her our daughter officially was super special. And I'm so glad that we had that moment. It was super special.
That's incredible. Wow. I know that you've shared this, and before, like in some of the prep work, I noticed you shared this, but you sometimes say or think like people listening might be like, okay, I was thinking about doing foster care, but I don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
What do you say to people when I know you've said your story there is no like pretty bow on the end, right? In the sense of anything on earth here.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if we, took out Journey's story, and you just saw our story of fostering. We've had some really, really hard moments, especially with some of the teens that we've had. I'm sure people close to us just think like, why are you doing this? And people that we meet, maybe we try not to spill all of our hardships all the time, because then, people would be like, maybe not. But I would say if it's a calling from God and it's in your purpose, one, he'll give you all the strength that you need. And two, you're going to see blessings from that. I'm not talking about like financial blessings or, extravagant things, but we've been so blessed through our whole fostering journey in general. Just seeing the support and getting to meet these kids, getting to support Journey through her battle where she might not have had anybody.
Wow.
I always say I can't imagine what would have happened if we had said no. Maybe there would have been another family that had said yes. But if there hadn't, Journey would have lived her whole life in the hospital with no family. And that just breaks my heart. I can't even imagine it. And so, it's one of those things as an adult, you just have to trust God, knowing that you're going to go through hardship. It's going to be hard, but knowing that God has a purpose in it. There are going to be good things that come from it, but ultimately, we live to serve him and we live to bring glory to him. And if that's our goal, and no matter how that happens, that's what we're going to continue to do.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it isn't about us.
Right.
And isn't it true that when we do live for us, and we all fall into this because we are selfish people, right?
Yes.
We focus on me. But it's never fulfilling.
No.
Like when I get stuck in my head and I'm thinking about me and how this made me, all that stuff. And I'm not suggesting we don't feel our feelings and all that. I'm not saying any of that. But when that becomes my focus, when I become my focus, I'm miserable because it's not fulfilling. But when God is my focus, even in the hardest of times, he shows up in ways that are just so sweet and kind and unique to me. What are some of those ways that you experienced him?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, but it could go really small, or it seems small, to hearing certain songs on the radio come on. When we were after Journey was first diagnosed, I was driving home from the hospital that night, and I'm going to forget the name of it. Don't Lose Hope is kind of what I think of the song. I know that's not the song title, but anyways, there's a line in the song where it says, "Take joy in the journey, even when it feels long, knowing that heaven is cheering you on." And so then it goes through, "Don't lose hope, soon your burdens will all be gone." And I heard that song on the radio driving home, and just hearing that phrase, "Take joy in the journey," because her name was Journey, just spoke to me. That whole song did. I heard that same song, as she was laying on our floor on hospice a few days before she passed. And it was just a reminder that, God is here and he's with us, and we're still supposed to take joy in that journey, no matter how grim it looks to us here on earth. So simple reminders on the radio would pop up. We had people that we didn't even know before all of this happened, that would kind of step out with similar experiences. Maybe they had a child that had gone through cancer, so they knew what we were going through. We had people bringing us meals and showing up. And like I said, COVID, I know it was a really rough time for people, but to us, it was a huge blessing. It's almost like the whole world shut down for us and for what we were going through. So yeah, there's tons of those little things that would happen, and
that it just gives you the strength you need to get through the next steps, the next moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being renewed daily. The Bible talks about how the Holy Spirit renews us daily.
Yes.
And his mercies are new every morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about boundaries in relationships, and especially when you're going through difficult things. I think boundaries become even more important then. And I know that you've found them to be helpful. What are some boundaries that you have implemented or have found helpful in your journey as you walked with Journey, as you do foster care, just as you have lived a life that isn't easy?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing, just in general with foster care and boundaries, when we take in kids from hard places, there's going to be a lot that goes on in your home that people don't see, behaviors that come up that won't come out in public. But also you just have to have a lot of extra time devoted to fostering in general. So some of those boundaries just might look like saying no to certain things that you might have said no to before, just to keep, your time, your family time, not to get too overwhelmed. Maybe, setting clear boundaries with people, even if it's just kind of subconsciously in your head, of who you're going to share things with and who you're not going to share things with. There's certain people that will ask questions because they're genuinely curious and they want to know, which is great. I love talking to people about foster care. But then there's some people who want to know those things because they want to step up and they want to help you and they want to get involved in your life. And so, creating those boundaries with, those people that are going to stick with you versus maybe the people that just want to watch your story. And then setting your time limits on things and having those certain days where you're like, I'm not leaving the house. I'm devoting it to family. All of those things have been helpful for us as we've gone through lots of different scenarios over the past 5 years.
Yeah, because the reality is we are limited human beings.
Yes.
We only have a certain amount of energy, and we need to guard that so that we can be the best version of ourselves, or the person that God is calling us to be for our priority people, right? And then moving out from there to our neighbors. And that's good. And I'm guessing it's been a trial and error a little bit, boundaries,
Absolutely.
Figuring out. Yeah.
Yes. There's times where I spill too much information to somebody and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Not because of them, because of me and,
Sure.
privacy things. But I'm just, maybe exhausted that day or emotional that day. And so, it's a lot of trial and error and mistakes and all of that. Just like you said, we're human, we make mistakes every day, and foster care just brings that up even more, I think, because it brings you to extreme highs and extreme lows.
Yeah.
So.
And it's new. I mean, you're navigating things you've never navigated before. And so I know for myself, I can fall into this perfectionistic mindset of like, I want to do it perfectly. Well, I have learned over and over and over and over and over. That is just such a incorrect view, one, and it's impossible. But we need to, no one can do something brand new perfectly. I tell my kids, like, when failure is part of learning. I have to tell myself that as well. But you think of a little toddler trying to walk, and they don't just get up and walk. They get up and they fall and they try to take a step and they fall. And none of us would say, shame on you for not doing that perfectly. But we can, at least I know that I can fall into that. Shame on you, Jamie, for not not knowing what you didn't know before.
Yes.
So I think we need to give ourselves some grace in that. And man, Bethany, I really, really appreciate you sharing. I know that it is emotional. It is not an easy thing just to go broadcast some of the the hardest pieces of your heart. And yet I'm really thankful that we got to know Journey just a little bit through her story. And I would love to just ask you, as we close out here, there are other foster moms, foster dads who have experienced similar things, who have loved a child who passed away in their care. And they're shattered, they're grieving. Would you be able to give a piece of encouragement or hope to them as we close?
Yeah. I've said it a lot, but just taking everything day by day, sometimes hour by hour, and even minute by minute, especially, in the beginning stages when you're just thrown into grief and you feel that loss a lot heavier than maybe you do a couple years later. And knowing that loss is never going to leave. You're always going to feel that loss. But maybe that loss feels a little lighter in the future than it does right now. I would just say, set those boundaries, take the time for yourself to heal, to grieve. It's okay to cancel things. It's okay to not go places you had intended. It's okay for the laundry not to get done. But really finding what works for you to grieve best. And whether that's going on a walk or cooking a new recipe, maybe doing something that, whomever you lost loved to do, to remember them. Those are all just super, super important things I've learned that help me. And then, of course, getting into God's word, which I know can be really, really hard in the beginning when you've lost so much. It doesn't seem like maybe God cares or God's listening to those prayers at 12 a.m. But knowing that he has a purpose in it. And I know you wish he didn't have a purpose in it because it is very hard. But just knowing that you can continue to step forward, you can continue to walk through the pain and the hurt, one baby step at a time, and rely on those people that you can and that maybe have gone through the same thing as you have. Find a support group if you can. We did, I think, like a 6-week support group for people who had lost their children to pediatric cancer. And those people just get it. So find those people that know what you're going through, and take a leap of faith when you do it, because it's hard to sign up for things like that. Just keep pressing forward and trusting God and knowing that he has what's best for you in mind, even if it doesn't feel good.
Wow. Bethany, thank you so, so much for who you are and for being on today.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.